Welcome, 151 students. So what I'm going to record right now is basically a little walkthrough of the reading assignment for this week. It's pages 165 to 177 in your textbook, From Inquiry to Academic Writing. So I just wanted to call your attention to a couple of things in the reading for this week. First of all, take a look at the table that's on pages 167 to 168 in your textbook. Pay attention to that. Not every part of that table is going to be equally important. For the purposes of this essay, in other words, the essay you'll be writing next for me, I'd like you to pay attention to a couple of different sources. And by the way, these sources, I should probably preface everything that I'm saying over here by adding that this reading will help you to write essay number 3. I should indicate that right up front. So this is going to help you to write essay number 3. Remember, essay number 2 is going to be taken directly from the materials that I am assigning you. In other words, for essay number 2, you'll be using all the sources that were discussed on the syllabus. So we've already discussed the death penalty readings. We're discussing the digital life readings this week, the Sherry Turkell, the Duolingo, the history retweets itself, which we'll be discussing next time. And so everything that I'm going to discuss for you right now, I just want to be clear, is to help you to write essay number 3, okay? Not an essay number 2, okay? So I just want to be clear about that. The reason why I'm talking about essay number 3, even before you've submitted essay number 2, is that essay number 3 is a research-based essay, okay? So essay 3 will be a research-based essay, and so everything that you're going to hear about in this video is to help you to begin your research. What I want to indicate to you is that research takes time, and so learning how to do research, learning to find the right materials, learning to sift through all the sources that you find, figuring out what's usable and what's not usable, what's credible, what's believable, what's reliable, and what is not. All of this takes time, and so therefore this video and the reading that I assigned to you for homework will help you to start preparing for the long-range goal of writing essay number 3. I just want to be absolutely clear about that. So, for the purposes of essay number 3, if you look at that table, there'll be several different sources that you'll be using to write that third essay, and so pay attention to abstracts. You will definitely be using that. Pay attention to databases. You'll definitely be using that. Encyclopedias you might need. Certainly internet search engines. Certainly newspapers. You might need a thesaurus, although you may not as well. And data and statistics, although most of the stats that you'll be using will be quoted by the authors that you're citing. So just to be sure, those are the sources that you'll be using to write essay number 3. So I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of different types of sources on page 170 of your textbook. A primary source. A primary source is a first-hand or eyewitness account, the kind you find in letters or in newspapers or research reports in which the researcher explains his or her impressions of a particular phenomenon. So you will be using some primary sources, although most of your sources will be secondary sources. For essay number 3, a secondary source is an analysis of information reported in a primary source. So again, it's more analytical, it's less firsthand, okay? That's the key thing to remember. And for your third essay, most of your sources will be secondary sources, although there is the possibility of including primary sources as well. Popular sources versus scholarly sources. Pages 170 to 171. Popular sources are written for a general audience, right? They can be specialized, but they're written so that any educated reader can understand them, okay? So these are sources like the New York Times, for instance, or the Wall Street Journal. So these are popular sources. Scholarly sources are written for experts in a particular field. However, you will still be using them, although you may not be an expert in the field of, let's say, capitalism and gender or the death penalty. These are still sources that you can use in order to back up your point. Scholarly sources are peer-reviewed sources. What does that mean? It means that they don't get published until they've been carefully evaluated by the author's peers. Who are the author's peers? Other experts in the academic conversation being conducted in the same journal. So scholarly sources are peer-reviewed. In other words, they are vetted sources, right? They're sources that have gone through a process of several people fact-checking them and making sure that the arguments are sound sources. And so therefore scholarly sources are better sources than popular sources. Keep that in mind as you're thinking about essay number 3. Pay attention to the chart on page 171. I won't say any more than that. Just use it as a reference guide. Pages 173 and 174 talk about how to perform searches in internet search engines. The best search engine that I recommend to you, I recommend the search engines in the library. Okay, you can go to Google. You can go to other public search engines, but the search engines in the library will yield the most reliable scholarly sources. And that's what you want for your third essay. Again, Google is fine. Google Scholar is better. But again, the library search engines will definitely give you peer-reviewed sources. When you start to search using a search engine, you can perform a keyword search. This is important because it defines the topic. So generally speaking, what I suggest that you do is, if you don't know what your thesis is, if you don't know what your topic is, don't begin with a keyword search. Rather, while you're still formulating your thesis, I would suggest searching by subject rather than performing a keyword search, because searching by subject is the best way to begin doing your research. When the subject search results in keywords, usually if you do a subject search, keywords, additional keywords, will usually show up at the bottom of the screen. You can use these keywords to further narrow down the topic or thesis that you want to do research on. Okay, so I would suggest beginning with a subject search, and then once you've got your topic further narrowed down, then it might be good to perform a keyword search, right? Because a keyword search defines the topic of your search, and it allows you to narrow it down even further. You can search by a topic, by an author, by a general subject. So I would suggest beginning with the subject search and then continuing on to a keyword search. That's my advice to you. A browse search is a heading search. This is not a list of books. So again, this is very, very vague. If you're going to begin searching and you have no idea what you want to write about, you want to have some brainstorming done, a browse search is the way to begin. If on the other hand, you already have a topic narrowed down, then you may want to search by subject. And if you are pretty sure about which direction you want to research in, but you don't know specific articles, then perform a keyword search. Okay, so a browse search is not a list of books. It's the most vague, it's the most broad type of search. A browse search can be used to determine the list of headings which are relevant to your topic, your issue, or your question. Okay, so you can also perform, another type of search you can perform is a journal or newspaper search. Again, I've already given you oral presentations to make from the New York Times, so you already have access to the New York Times database. You can use their search engine. You can get, the good thing about doing a newspaper search is that your sources will be timely. They will be up-to-date sources, right? And so if you're going to write about a topic that really requires your data to be really, really current, a newspaper source would be a good thing. But just be mindful about one thing, though, if you're going to do a newspaper search, which is that newspaper articles usually will lack the depth and complexity of more scholarly sources. So just be careful not to use only newspaper articles when you're researching for paper number 3, okay? I don't want all your sources to be newspaper sources. You can use some, but don't make all of your sources newspaper sources. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to say about the first part of the reading. Here are the questions that I would like you to answer. So here are the questions that I would like you to answer and then respond to via email, as I indicated in the announcements page. So here's the first question. Of the 3 articles that I assigned to you on the death penalty, which one featured a primary source? Which of those articles featured a primary source, and who was that primary source? That's the first question. The second question is, I would like you to cite an example of a secondary source that was quoted in one of the essays that I assigned to you. It can be either a death penalty essay or it can be any of the digital life essays, okay? But give me an example of a secondary source. Cite an example of a secondary source that was quoted in one of these essays. So here's the third question. If you want to know what the opinion, this is a multiple choice question. If you want to know what the opinion of most Americans is about the death penalty, whether people are pro the death penalty or against the death penalty, what kind of source would you investigate? Would you use a primary source, a secondary source, a popular source, or a scholarly source? So in your answer, please choose A, B, C, or D and explain very briefly, maybe in a sentence or two, why you've chosen A, B, C, or D. Here is question number 4 actually has a couple of parts to it. If the article or essay that you're reading is written by a blogger, then is your source from a popular source or from a scholarly source? If the article or essay you're reading is written by a blogger, then is your source coming from a popular source or from a scholarly source? If your article or if the article or essay that you're reading is published by Oxford University Press, then is your source from a popular source or a scholarly source? And the third part is, if your article or essay that you're reading has advertisements in it, then is your source from a popular source or a scholarly source? 4D, if the article or essay that you're reading doesn't have citations at the end of it, then is your source from a popular source or a scholarly source? And again, this is just for A, you can just write down one or the other. Same thing for B, C, D, right? Indicate whether it's a popular source or a scholarly source. And the last thing that I want you to answer is, what is Project Muse? This is part of the reading as well. So please answer these 5 questions. It shouldn't take you a long time, and email it to me by this coming Friday. Okay, one more video to follow. That's the next one. That's going to be on pages 177 to 185. Okay, so please consult that video as well. 5 more questions at the end of that video. Thanks.